My name is Joe Satriani. I play guitar. In the back of a 48 Dodge two-door car, probably my parents' first car or something like that, I remember hearing Sleepwalk by Santa and Johnny, thinking it was the most beautiful thing I ever heard in my life. Still do. But yeah, those are my earliest memories. When I was a little kid growing up in the 60s, my sister Marion, who was a folk guitarist, so she was always playing her guitar, writing songs. I saw her perform. My parents would have these crazy parties and they would invite these Jesuits over, and these Jesuit priests were like party animals, smoking and drinking whiskey and playing guitars. And they played all the folk music from the 60s all the time. So that was the first time that I really got that feeling of people playing guitars together, sitting around in the living room, having arguments and philosophical discussions and playing music and laughing. And great sound, great vibrations, I guess. I played the drums. That was my thing, starting at about 9 years old. When I heard Jimi Hendrix on the radio, that blew my mind. It was almost as if my DNA changed, like something inside of me changed, and I realized it was like a calling. But I was too really immature to figure out what to do about it until Jimi Hendrix died, and that day was the day I decided to be a guitarist. It was a funny moment. I was in a dark, damp rehearsal basement in the Mission somewhere. Bobby Vega was in the band, a bass player, Bobby Vega, amazing bass player. And I was on the little stage and I was just playing some chords. And Bobby's in the dark and he's sitting out there in the room and he goes, "Hey, you're famous." And I go, "What are you talking about, Bobby?" He goes, "You're famous, you're in this magazine, Guitar Player magazine. What are you doing in there?" And I go, "I don't know. What is it? What are they saying?" And he says, "Well, it says here you have an album." And I was like, oh, like shit. That's right. I said, "They review the album." And he goes, "Yeah, it's a good review. It's like 2 sentences, but it's positive review." So he reads me this review and I realize they don't know that I'm Joe in this basement in Mission, going nowhere with this band. They don't know that. They just listened to this really avant-garde EP that I put out. And they thought, well, this guy's really something. He's just doing something totally different. It was one of those moments where I thought, I'm that person too. I'm not just this guy trying to get a gig to pay the rent. I'm also that guy, and maybe I should just full-time be that other guy and forget about this. And so I did pack up that night, and I didn't return. And I couldn't figure out how I was going to make any money at it, and I didn't. But it did teach me a lesson that someone was listening. It gave me the absurd courage to record Not of This Earth, which was, really a stretch for my situation. But it turned out okay. I don't think I ever feel like myself on stage. I think that's the problem, right? You walk out on stage and you go, oh, they're gonna know it's just me. I think the history of performing live has been a recurring subject nightmare for me because I'm not really a kind of a people person. I don't seek out to be in a crowd and be in front of an audience, but I love music and I want to share it. So there's the typical artist conflict right there. My son made a documentary about it and we decided that Shockwave Supernova was the character that I invented to become that person that could be extroverted on stage. When you get recognized for doing something, almost anything, and it could be when you're really young, just playing for your family or your friends, it plants a seed that you're on the right path, that imitation is going to get you work, but it's not the path that leads you through life. It's not going to be artistically fulfilling, and ultimately it works against your career. We used to have this discussion with a lot of my students. When you're a young student, you have very little time. to practice, and you have to figure out, what do I practice? Being original, it's easy to say, well, I'm not going to copy anybody, I'm going to just be original, but it's like you probably won't get any work. And you need to get paid so you can buy strings and guitars and amps and everything, you know? And you need to get work so you can play with other people. And then the most important thing is, if you don't have gigs, you'll never get experience doing the thing that is what you're playing for, which is you're trying to make music for people. That's actually your real job that you're trying to get. So you do have to learn to imitate other people just so you give them a good time when you're playing in a cover band. You know, that's how you start out. But at some point you have to make that delineation inside of yourself, like, I'm not doing impressions, I'm learning the technique and copying it for this particular purpose. And I'm not convinced that being original is all it's cracked up to be anyway. Because truly, in the end, we're supposed to be making music for people. And whether we're original or not, I don't really think they care so much on a gig-to-gig basis. And I learned this the hard way, being in a disco band, playing around the East Coast, and just not playing really anything and just making people happy. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is the easiest job, but it's really sad that they don't care, that there's no soul in what I'm doing. If you're privileged to be a musician that doesn't need to have a musical job, it's totally different than if you're a working musician that needs to have a gig every week. It's a completely different world. Working in a vintage guitar shop, you kind of get disillusioned about the price of these things and what they actually sound like. Because after hours, we would sit there, my friends and I, we would play all these guitars that were supposedly the most expensive, the most valuable, rare guitars. And it would be like, there's nothing special about it. The musician has to connect with the guitar for it to become special. So I thought, yeah, we can start building our own guitars, but it was really just to get by week to week and do the gig that I was doing at the time. Silly me, I'm thinking about inventing new forms of harmony to play over. Thinking about, you know, even stuff that that I learned in high school. I think I wrote that at that rehearsal with Bobby Vega sitting in the dark there, not of this earth. You know, just it occurred to me that what was lacking was innovation in the harmonic department. As a composer that's looking to get excited about new stuff, there's going to be that hunger there, I think. And it was for me ever since my high school music teacher, Bill Westcott. He started something inside of me that made me yearn for just interesting harmony that other people weren't using at all. And I knew that I could make it sound like what my generation wanted to hear. I wasn't thinking about imitating any trend. I was just thinking, I know who I am. I'm Joe from Long Island. This is the way I want to hear it, you know? We do chase technology from our musical desires. Same thing with something like this Ibanez guitar or the Sustainiac. The question that comes up is, what am I going to do with it? If you think about people who play wah-wah pedals, the ones we like, they have a distinctive way of using it. From Hendrix to Michael Schenker, you can pick it out in a second, you know. Eventually you come full circle and you say, I got to figure out, like, how does it work with me? What am I going to get out of it? How is it going to help me complete this message or this song? And ultimately that's the homework that I think each artist has to do. My older sisters were professional artists. They have degrees in fine art. My father could paint, but he was an engineer by profession. But when I was a kid and growing up, there was just a lot of art materials in the house, so I just remember always drawing. As I grew up and I became a professional musician, I always would be drawing because there's such an enormous amount of downtime, right? You're just hanging around most of the time, you know, it's crazy. After a while, I realized, well, you know, I should get some of this artwork involved in what I do instead of just always hiring artists I don't know. And as each record cycle would come, there would be new ways to exploit the visual medium to help let people know you have a new album out. You know, as you went from albums to cassettes and CDs, new configurations, and then artwork on picks and straps, and everything started to accelerate quite a bit. I benefited from always meeting some really interesting people who illuminate me to the possibilities of how they could be manipulated and moved to a product like a Strat. God bless Mark Mangy when he was working at the Dario. You know, he's probably scarred for life looking through all my drawings, thousands of drawings, and he was able to pick out a lot of the figures I was doing and figure out a way to get them on the straps. It was a really nice open door to keep creating even when my fingertips were killing me from playing too much guitar. I could move over into the art studio and start painting. And Rabina, my wife, who has a degree in art as well, she answered every question I had about paint and brushes and materials. And suddenly I found myself just in this wonderful world of expression. I'd go and I'd listen to Black Sabbath for a week straight and do nothing but paint, you know? And I would have these great musical journeys that would then stimulate me to paint. All of a sudden I'm doing art shows and the paintings are selling, and it's really, really wonderful. When I do these art shows and I play at them, it's really pretty freaky because it's the only time I get to see 100 pieces of my artwork all hanging in one room. And I play guitar in front of a small audience while all those portraits are looking at me. It's the weirdest thing. Before I play, I'm meeting these people who buy these paintings, who are moved by them. So there's this intimacy that is not present when you do the arena. You know, the arena is about pointing. You know, you do this a lot with it. This is, you play a note like this maybe, if I get, and you point all the way up there, you know. But when you do the art shows, it's totally different. You're connecting with these people you've never met before, and you being really honest and heartfelt with each other. And there's all this crazy artwork that just pulls at my heartstrings anyway to see it. And then I've got to play, you know. It's really intense, but I do love it. So many times I've seen guitar players on stage switch into a guitar, and you see them go out and the strap is on and it's twisted, and you think, oh, that's gonna fall off, isn't it? And at some point, they wave their hands to the audience, you know, and the strap twists off and the guitar goes down. So there's gotta be a way that's better than the bread bag tie or the Grolsch rubber thing that is built into the strap so that you don't really have to worry about it. It seemed to me that using a device that would always swivel back into position would solve that problem. So often, the timing thing just drives me crazy on stage. You switch guitars, and there's all this fuss about the strap not being on right, you know. That's another thing that should never happen. It should never interrupt a performer's flow. And so you want this thing to just instantly just right itself like that. I put together a really crude one, and I sent it to the guys at the Dario, and I said, this is a really serious problem that guitar players have. So this is really great, and we've been using this out on tour ever since it came out. I love these, you know, they're fantastic. The swivel strap, it's amazing how it works. It's so cool. Earlier, you asked me what I had for breakfast, right? And while I was eating my cereal, I was watching a clip of Jimi Hendrix playing Machine Gun from the Fillmore East. Absolutely mind-blowing performance. Best live electric guitar performance I've ever witnessed in my life. What pick was he using? I can't hear it. That was one of the things I loved about his playing, was that there was nothing methodical or didactic about it. It was just pure music. I could not hear the pick. I love that. And I was just intrigued by that. And I thought, this thing is like a samurai's sword. This thing has to become part of you. It is how you express yourself. I started to really focus in on the things that really make a difference in sound. I'd have a medium pick on the console or by my amp, and there'd be a heavy one or a thin one, and I'd say, wow, this sounds different, you know? What I did notice was mass does make a difference. That journey from thin to medium to heavy to extra heavy was something that I was sort of observing while listening to recordings back, by saying to myself, no, you're not crazy. That thing that you're feeling when you're feeling it. And I was just thinking about the quality of the sound in general, how it flexed, how it didn't flex, how it would glide off the strings. Was there enough resistance? Would it provide some sound that you really liked? I would try everything. Felt picks, stone picks, weird bones, pick builders would send me stuff made from suspicious material. I didn't like all the other materials that were available out there. I noticed that as we were making a lot of different picks with different artwork on it, and I'd be doing these shows, that they'd be getting pretty hot and sweaty, and I'd have a hard time holding on to the pick. It was like sweat everywhere. If you put a hole in the pick, then you get rid of the mass, and so that's gonna make the note sound not as thick. The idea is you need a positive and a negative space, and we have to come up with the right shape, the right amount. And I just happened to be looking at my logo, and I thought, well, this looks like it's got some positive and negative space to it. The sound had to be right. The pick had to follow what was inside, what I was trying to say. Like if I had a set of lyrics, and I went from saying something absurd to something beautiful, to something mysterious, to something very plain and simple. I couldn't just play through it like I was proving to the audience, look what I've practiced. I can pick up and down at any speed, To me, that was the worst message you could send to the audience, because then they weren't thinking about the song, they were only thinking about you and how much you practiced. And I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in expression, It's just a really great extra heavy pick. And that's what I wanted from the beginning. I didn't want to change anything. I just needed the grip to come with it, so. The thing in the studio very often is, they say you can't really boost something that's not there. The strings have got to actually have the sonic information to be manipulated properly by the guitarist, by their instrument, by their amps and their pedals. A good guitar string, it's got to sound good, it's got to stay in tune, it's got to last. Once you get your gauge preference together, you really start to focus in and notice the difference between the manufacturers. How long has it been I've been playing the Dario strings? Yeah, and that's just when I got associated with the company. But before then, that was my favorite string when I was working out of secondhand guitars in Berkeley, California. They do feel familiar to me all the time, which I find magical. My fingers were spinning, trying to get used to vibrato and bending when I would go from 9.5s at 440 down to 11s at D standard. But what was constant was the quality of the strings and the tension between each of the strings, which I think is really magical. Great sound, tunes up, holds tunes, lasts a long time, and then that unique, mysterious string tension. At the end of the year, I try to clean house in a lot of different ways. And one way is to really look at a lot of gear that I haven't been using, and I put it in a box. And I call Alan here at Bananas at Large, and I say, Alan, can I come by with a box of stuff? And he figures out, he finds people who are really looking for this stuff, which is great. And they can make some new music with it. But, if it's not part of your creative process anymore, then you have to realize it's just a thing. But ultimately, the creativity in the music has to come from inside of you, and everything else is a tool for that.